Let's get specifics on this long segment coming up. Plenty of time, Lindsey. And then, did you record these guys? Do you have their authorization? Or did they tell you, go out and find this press release? That's where it's been admitted in plain view. I know that's one of their favorite little tricks. It's like one of their rules. This is all breaking. I just knew that M.Fromm was about to die of cancer, and then we called, and he has died. They have had the funeral. So Lindsey's giving it all to us right now. Very powerful. Lindsey Williams, the biggest data dump we've ever gotten from him, and just thank God for him. Pastor Williams, again, 20-plus years ago, wrote a book, The Energy Non-Crisis, laying out how there were more oil reserves that had been discovered in Alaska, much of it sweet crude, than all of Saudi Arabia, but we're not allowed to have it. They could have dozens of pipelines coming down. Our gas would be incredibly cheap, but it's a rigged system. And that has now all come out mainstream news, making, really his original stuff passé. But people couldn't believe it 25 years ago. Now, M.Fromm, I knew that Dr. Monteith loves to dig around, and he figured out who he was, called him. He figured out who the other guy was. I'd figured it out. It was all hidden in plain view. And so I knew Williams was telling the truth. And people hear it, and they're like, this can't be true that, that the elite are actually talking to each other and know what's coming, know what's going to happen. Folks, I don't know any billionaires. I've met a few. And a billionaire I ran into through another person I know. And then afterwards, after I'd met with her, I looked her up online and found that I was just blown away. This is one of the richest women in the United States. She doesn't live here now. And she said, this was about 3.5 years ago. And she said, in 3 years, so I guess she's a little behind on the time, there won't be a United States. And I said, what does that mean? She just said, I'm getting out of here. And she said, you'll see. Then I'm out in the hill country at an event with some people that my kids are friends with, and there's John Wayne's, one of his kids living out there, and they're like, and I went and looked him up later, and it is one of John Wayne's kids. I'm leaving the country, because of all these new rules. I mean, they all know, folks. They all know what's going on. Every time I run into some elitist or wealthy person, they're like either laughing at everybody or like abandoned ship because they have, well, let's go to Lindsey Williams. Lindsey, in the interest of time, because, we're running out here and there's so much to tell. Let's go through it piece by piece. Your other Mr. X, not M.Fromm, but the other Mr. X, who was even more high level than him, he told you specifically what about the euro collapse. Did he give you time frames? And then you got cut off by the break. You said you'll only have 2 or 3 weeks to get out. What does that mean? Quantify that question.
Okay. Again, let me say that only by the providence of God could I have never known any of these things. Don't give Lindsey Williams credit for this. All right. He said to me the other day, he said, Lindsey, I want to show you how to listen to some buzzwords. And I'm going to give them to you right now. Alex wants me to give them quick. I'll try my best to do it. I want to train you. I want to teach you right now how to listen to the buzzwords of the elite. He gave me a few of them. And he said, you listen to these and then figure it out for yourself. Here's one right here. You probably saw it in the national media. He told me to listen to it. The International Monetary Fund. It was only a few days ago that they said, now pick out the buzzwords, and then I'll give them to you and explain them. He said, 15 major developing country governments, including the U.S., Japan, and the UK, Spain, and Greece, must raise $10.2 trillion. And that's correct. You did not hear me say million or billion. Said they must raise $10.2 trillion to repay nothing but the interest only, on the indebtedness of these countries. And then he said to me, can they do that? And I said, no. I said, it's a total impossibility. He said, now, listen to the rest of this. He said, this $10.2 trillion that they must raise in order to pay the interest just on the debt alone is 27% of their combined annual economic output. He said, Chaplain, you cannot repay that. He said, all right. Now, he's training me to listen. And I did this years ago. I trained myself to listen to their buzzwords, but he's kind of helping me understand their very latest buzzwords, and I'm trying to help you understand them. Okay, now, he said, if this can't be done, then what are they going to do about that debt? I said, they can't pay it. He said, that's right. He said, then what happens to the currency of the United States and Japan and the UK and Spain and Greece? I said, it's got to collapse. He said, now you're getting the message. He said, we told you all the time what was going to happen, but he said the average American hasn't got sense enough to understand what we're trying to say. Let me give you some more buzzwords. Take the Comic Silver Exchange. He said, listen to what they told you last week. Are you ready? Now, you know what the Comic Silver Exchange is. They're the ones that hold the silver in their vaults for the richest people on the face of the earth, the people in China and Japan and Russia and the wealthy people of the world. And then they give them a piece of paper saying, we are holding this silver for you. Now, he said the Comic Silver Exchange announced just the other day that they have 107 million ounces of silver on hand. Now, you folks, you're listening. They've got 107 million ounces of silver on hand, but they have contractual obligations in the amount of 720 million ounces of silver that they've given out pieces of paper saying, we have this on hand and we can deliver it to you upon your request. Now, he said, Chaplain, whenever that people start to ask for delivery of that physical silver, he said, what is going to happen to the price of silver? He said, Mr. Fromm told you back about a year or two ago that the only thing you could spare your assets in is silver and gold. Now, folks, I don't sell silver and gold. You listen to Alex Jones. He'll tell you where to go and buy that. I'm just trying to tell you that they told me 2 years ago, Chaplain, there's only one way you're going to spare your assets, and that's silver and gold. Well, the price has gone so high, most people can't buy it. But I warned you back when you could get it for $600 and $700 an ounce that you ought to buy it immediately.
Well, let me go back, Lindsey. Let me go back. I mean, people say to me, well, why are you promoting silver and gold? And I've had national media ask me that, and I look at them like they're crazy, and I say, I was promoting gold when it was $300 an ounce. I was promoting silver when it was $5 an ounce because I knew they were devaluing the currency and it would come to a head and that they got rid of Glass-Steagall. I mean, it'd be kind of like if I moved to a resort town in Colorado and set up a canoe shop by a river. Well, why did you set up a canoe shop? Because there's tourists around here. I mean, it's like the George Soros media, they make it like bad to promote silver and gold when it's like common sense. I mean, it's just crazy that I believe in silver and gold. I've got guns. I've got storable food. I've got water filters. I'm trying to move right now to the countryside. I'll just be honest with folks. It's better than just leaving the country. People I know that are smart have moved out of Austin far out in the country, and people that are smart are getting ready. Because let me tell you, when they tell you the economy's going to turn around, it's a lie, ladies and gentlemen. They've designed this. They're just stalling you long enough so they can make sure they're all prepared and got their grid in place. I'm sorry, Lindsey. It's just my job's easy.
Alex, I am so glad to hear you say what you just said. I want to congratulate you. You know where Mr. Schwartzman, you know who Schwartzman is? He's the head of the Blackstone Group.
Yes.
I keep up with these elites. And I have made a survey as to where the elite live. Where did Mr. Fromm live? He lived in the middle of nowhere. He lived way out in a little close place called Salton, Alaska before he died. He moved to the middle of nowhere. Where does this other Mr. X in my book, Energy Non-Crisis, live? He lives back further than what Mr. Fromm lived. Now, why did Schwartzman of the Blackstone Group, which is he is probably the biggest financier of financial instruments in the United States of America, and he said last week, he said, I'm leaving the country. Now, I'm not leaving the country. Alex, you're not leaving the country.
Wait, that's a bombshell. He told you he's leaving the country himself.
Well, yeah, but you and I are not leaving the country. We're staying here. We're going to fight this thing out and see it through, and I want to continue to be able to be here to get information from these people and to give it out to you on the Alex Jones Show and every place I could possibly give it in order to help spare you. Listen,
I don't know how long we're going to be here. The stuff going on behind the scenes is just not...
Well, I'm glad you're moving out, though, Alex. Moving out to the country, moving out in the wide open spaces. I did the same thing. I live in the middle of nowhere, and you've got to make preparations right now. Okay, let me go back to their buzzwords again, because this fits right in with the European Union, and I'm not playing games. I just want to teach you how to listen to the buzzwords of the elite. So you can do this for yourself, because I only have the privilege of being on Alex Jones' show maybe every once a month or two. But, okay, European Union. The European Union is going to have a major problem. I've already been told that. The euro will collapse before the American dollar. And whatever it does, you have 2 to 3 weeks to get out of paper. Do you remember what I told you that Mr. Fromm said to me back about 2 years ago? He said, Chaplain, if it's written on a piece of paper, it's worth the paper it's written on. He said, get out of anything that is paper. Now, do you realize what that means? That means get out of your IRAs, get out of your 401ks, get out of your retirement funds, cash in at any cost. I don't care what it may be. You're going to lose them anyway. If you don't, your Social Security, you cannot depend on it. I know you've got it right now, but you're not going to be able to depend on it for that long. You think your insurance policy is going to be worth anything whenever paper becomes worthless? And what is it that you and I use every day? We use the Federal Reserve note. And I have been told that when you see the euro collapse, you have 2 to 3 weeks to get out of every piece of paper you've got, including your bank account. If you don't, you're going to lose it. Alex, I don't know how any plainer I can put it. And they've said to me, okay, the other day one of them said to me, he said the Federal Reserve is borrowing $100 billion every 30 days. Does this scare you? It ought to scare the pants off of you. And Mr. Fromm told me 2 years ago, and I said it over your program, Alex, and that was before the Federal Reserve started buying their own debt. He said to me, Chaplain, whenever the Federal Reserve begins to buy their own debt, he said it's practically all over. Now, the Federal Reserve is buying their own debt because China and Japan and other countries aren't buying it like they did before. And last week, the Federal Reserve borrowed $100 billion every 30 days.
And by the way, that's only QE2. They've now announced QE3. They're going to start borrowing $200 to $250 billion a month.
Yes. And where is the 10-year note? Now, most people are not necessarily financially minded.
But they're dumping treasuries all over the world. Russia and China 2 weeks ago announced that they were going to stop using the dollar between trade. Now they have officially, in fact, that's in my stack, I didn't get to it today, Russia to use China currency. So we were wondering what it would be. It's going to be the Chinese currency for all their trade between each other, which is massive. They border each other. I mean, it's happening. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. Did your source, the former CEO, not Mr. Rex, the other Atlantic Richfield former head, did he say what the time frame was? He said the time frame on oil a month ago, and suddenly it's gone up 15, 20 bucks since then and racing up. Did he say the time frame on the euro default?
He did not say when the euro is going to collapse. He merely said it's going to. He said, let this be a sign to you. Whenever it happens, he said you've got 2 to 3 weeks to make some very definite preparations if you haven't already done it. Now, many things that in your life you will begin to need to make those preparations right now because, for instance, you can't get out of your IRA in 2 weeks. They just don't let you do it.
Well, Lindsey, here's an example with yours truly. All the money, almost all the money I've got is just sitting there in a bank to run this operation because it costs so much to run it. You know, it takes $1 million to run it for 6 months. Anybody who's got employees and buildings and payroll and taxes and insurance knows that. So we don't have a big reserve, but we've got something because our mission. So, I mean, what do I even do with that? That's what's so crazy about this situation is I have to leave it in the bank to pay the bills and run the operation. So I guess it makes my head hurt, Lindsey.
Well, yes, it does. It'll make your head spin. And those are things that we all need to think about in advance. Now, why am I saying this? And why does Alex say these things day after day? I'm not saying this to scare you. Quite to the contrary. I want you to prepare and spare yourself heartache and save your dinner table. That's the only reason I'm telling you these things, not to keep you awake at night, but to make preparations right now, because if you prepare for the inevitable, then when it does happen, there'll be very little effect on you while the rest of the world is totally collapsing around you.
Well, Lindsey,
now,
you're absolutely right. People say, oh, the government fearmongers. Alex, you fearmonger. The government fearmongers about boogeymen with turbans on their head, and we all know 9/11 was an inside job used to set up the police state grid.